ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us and welcome. This is 100-Hour Launchpad. May I ask that we begin with a moment of silence. We honor the fallen men and women of our front lines who are represented in a special way by our doctors who have given their lives. I am dressed in white, as I always am, in their honor. Okay, if I can invite you, come back. These men and women have given their lives fighting in our medical front lines. I submit, ladies and gentlemen, that we too have our own front lines in this global pandemic. Humanity versus COVID-19. You and I are part of the fight. Each of us has our own battle. For us here in Ignite, we hear the call of duty in helping and supporting leaders to do three things. First, to keep their people and teams focused at a time when fear, panic, and hysteria have overtaken too many of us. Second, beyond focus, we want to help leaders keep their teams organized at a time when all the familiar and comfortable ways of business as usual have been disrupted. And finally, number three, to mobilize solutions and market responses quickly, in days. To this end, we have 100-Hour Launchpad. We are on our 6th episode ever since this lockdown. In every one of them, so the previous 5, we have challenged ourselves, along with our guests, people like you, to identify burning needs and screaming wants, opportunities that demand resolute solutions to be launched in 100 hours or less. That just means fast. Some of these solutions will require more time, some of them will require less time. 100 hours is 4 days. The point is as fast as we can go. And so here we are, ladies and gentlemen. Let us begin today's challenge, focused on jobs. I am your host, Andre Yap, founder and CEO of Ignite House. Along with my co-host, please welcome Miguel Aranaz, managing partner of Ignite Delta and Partners. Miguel.
Hi, Andre. Good afternoon. And good afternoon to everyone on the webcast.
Karen Lopez will lead our backstage team. Karen, can we please have our slides, our opening slides, please? And if I could now invite everybody to join us, it will be easier to follow this way. Okay, as you can see on your screens, we are on 100 Hours Launchpad, the CEO Challenge. Our featured guests are in every way, if they do not hold the title of CEO, they certainly are the equivalent to. The point here is that these are challenges, our topics, our quests are challenges taken on by leaders. So this is presented again by Ignite, House of Innovation, Home of Innovators. Can we move on, please? So these 100-hour challenges, we do them in 2 ways. What you have today is every Tuesday and Thursday from 2:30 to 4:30, we have the Open Door Challenge. So this is open to everybody. As you can see later on, we will introduce our cast of characters, which includes every single one of you. Then on the other hand, we have the closed door 100-hour challenge. These are company exclusives by appointment, also 2 hours. So for example, today's session, Tuesday, is going to be focused on where are the jobs. On Thursday, if we can also invite you, some of us attending Thursday are already here joining us. On Thursday, it will be digital ventures in the new normal. So today it's jobs ventures, Thursday it's digital ventures. On Friday, we have a third 100-hour challenge for the week. It will be a closed door session. Again, we have guests already from that environment. It will be with Union Banks. If we talk about innovator banks, I don't know that we have anyone more esteemed than Union Bank. And within Union Bank, we will be having the 100-hour challenge with their fintech team. So that'll be on Friday. Okay, so that's the background. What is this session? We now have a 2-hour Google Meets webcast. That's the primary mechanism. We are also joined by many more on Facebook Live. So the webcast is where we challenge our audience, led by leading minds in a sector of focus. Today is jobs, to jumpstart new normal ventures that can be launched fast. So today is about jobs. One thing you will find, ladies and gentlemen, while we have an esteemed panel of experts, both from economists to industry operators, startups, CEOs of corporates, we are not here to just talk and exchange notes. We are not here to find out what the government policy is going to be. We are not here to find out what the economy is going to be, at least not primarily. We are here for one purpose, to find out what we can do. That's why it's about launching, Launchpad. Knowing what we know from Bernie Villegas, from our startup founders, what can we identify as burning needs that we can address and address quickly? So in Ignite, we are so serious about this that we have started a venture catalyst fund, which means that for those of you who are independent entrepreneurs, if you want to start a venture and you need funding and it merits funding, we are happy to invest. Same thing, we are happy to co-invest with corporates here who will start entrepreneurial ventures that, again, focus on jobs ventures in the new normal. Okay, so if we can move on. What is the webcast? What is the flow for this 2-hour session? Okay, the first, it's divided into 2 segments. First, opportunity mapping. We find out amongst ourselves, collaboratively, who are the target stakeholders and what are their burning needs? What are the burning opportunities? And we zero in and codify that in terms of target impacts. Each of us, if this is Launchpad, each of us, in a sense, is in our own rocket ships, looking, scoping out for whatever it is that speaks to us, that inspires us, that requires launching. And again, that starts with the first segment, which is the target stakeholders. The second segment is then the sprint to a minimum viable launch, an MVP, minimum viable product. All right? We are going to get to portions of that today. So, for each of these 2 segments, the opportunity mapping and the MVP sprint, we now come to the cast of characters. How do you, our guests, participate? There are 4. This is what we call the cast. That's you and the cadence of how we interact with each other. Number 1, all participants will do the solo workouts per segment. You will see that later on. It will become very clear. Number 2, after we've done our solo workouts, which will be timed, we start a peer exchange, which is to say we're going to hear from each other about our views. In this regard, we will first hear from our esteemed team of guest collaborators who will share their solo workouts and amplify them with their own background expertise, particularly in the macroeconomy, what is going on? Where are the sources of job gains? Where are the sources of job losses? They will inform us. After we hear from them, the peer exchange will continue. We have another cast of characters called inside pass holders. These are by invitation, and they will be given the first dibs in terms of sharing with us their workouts, their ideas about the opportunities that they see and the problems that they see that require immediate fixing. And then finally, we will open it up to the audience. After that, the fourth thing is, after we've heard from everybody, we will invite you to go back to your solo workout and synthesize for yourself what you think the most burning opportunities are for yourself to address. Again, it comes down to, we're not here to just listen to each other. We are here to draw out from our expert collaborators, what is it that we can act on? So, that having been said, ready, set, launch. This is now the quest for the rest of this time. If you were to launch something today, it could be a venture, a project, an initiative, or a pivot of an existing enterprise. What would your top priority be, given the market needs and opportunities in the new normal? And of course, with this quest, we focus on jobs. With that, I'm gonna ask we're going to dive right in and do our first solo workout. Miguel Aranaz, my partner, is going to lead us there. And as part of this, we will start our timer. It's a 2-hour segment, and we're very serious about timing ourselves. So Karen, if we could get our timer set so that we count down from here to 4:30. Miguel, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Andre. So it's probably a good idea to have maybe a sheet of paper like near you. We're about to flash a slide. So like Andre mentioned, we're focusing on opportunity mapping, really. So it's really trying to figure out what opportunities are out there for us to actually explore and look into. So Karen, can you put on the slide, please? Okay, so this segment's all about zeroing in on your opportunity. All right. So we'll give you 5 minutes to answer this. So the first is who is your target stakeholder? So what is it about your target stakeholder? Who will benefit from a project? How do you encounter them in meaningful ways? So you're looking at people that you want to solve for and serve. And after that, based on your understanding of your stakeholder, you now have to look into, okay, what are the pain points of these stakeholders? What are possible opportunities that you can focus on and that you can address? Okay, so we have some guide questions there as well. And lastly, what is the target impact that you want to happen for your stakeholders? In Ignite, we use this format called the Delta statement, which is basically stating your impact as a from-to statement, from a current state to a new state. Okay, so do you want to add anything, Andre?
Yeah, this takes sometimes getting used to. Some people jump right into this and they get the drift. Some people are totally lost. However you fall, ladies and gentlemen, to either side, whether you totally get it or you don't worry, because that's also the benefit of doing this very fast. We will give you 5 minutes. The point is not to get the right answer. The point is just to get the juices flowing so that then we have crystallized, at least in our minds, if not in our hearts, what our opening ideas are before we start hearing from each other. So in a moment, in a few more minutes, we will be hearing from our panel of experts about their own views about the job market and who our primary stakeholders should be if we're thinking about launching something, what the target opportunities are and what the target impacts are. So do this as best you can. Don't panic, don't freak out, enjoy it, sit back and relax, and we will be with you in, Miguel, how much time are we giving them?
5 minutes.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, 5 minutes starts at Karen's timer now. Thank you.
Hi, Andre. This is Adrian.
Hello.
May you present again your slide, the original question?
This is the original question.
The first one, something about the job.
About the venture that you would start. What would it be?
Was it just an example? Something to do with the jobs? Prior to Miguel's presentation.
Who is this?
Adrian Robles.
Adrian, hi. Thanks for your question. That slide was the summary slide. If we presented that, people would start answering that, and we would be taking shortcuts, and we want to avoid that. So our position is in running these 100-hour launch pads is we always start from opportunity mapping. So stay patient, and you're gonna be the first person we're gonna call when we open up the audience format for your take on these 3 questions. We'll start here. Thank you, Adrian. So we're 2.5 minutes in. We're halfway there. I can see one of our lead guests, Greg Kittleson. I think he's got it all figured out. So again, this is about the jobs market. If you were to start something in the jobs market, who would the target stakeholder be? What would their pains be? We're counting down to the last 90 seconds. Last 30 seconds. Here we go, 10-second warning. There we go, we're down to 0 seconds. So thank you very much for everyone who did the solo workout. We are now going to go on to remember cast and cadence. Now we're gonna meet the rest. So far, you've only met 2 of our cast of characters, or rather 3. Myself, I'm Andre Yap again, Miguel Aranaz, and Karen, our backstage director. So now we're gonna turn over after we did that. Each of us have done the solo workout. We're going to hear from 3 rounds of people. First of all, our lead collaborators. We'll hear from each one of them about what their answers are. And of course, since they are experts in this field, we'll dig a little bit deeper to provide all of us broader and deeper insight. After that, we will turn it over to our invitation-only inside pass holders. These are experts in the field also, of business primarily. And they will expand our horizons. And finally, then we will open the floor to any one of you who wants to share or ask questions for that matter. After that, we will consolidate our opportunity mapping so that each of us has a synthesis of what we think the biggest opportunities are. And then we will move on to the next segment. For now, let's begin. The most exciting part for me always is to hear from our lead collaborators. So we have them on screen. If I may call first, to begin with, to get us started, he is often referred to as the prophet of boom. One of our foremost economists in the Philippines and a very good friend of mine, Dr. Bernie Villegas. If we could welcome Dr. Bernie, please. So Bernie, good afternoon to you again.
Good afternoon to all of you, Andre. Yeah.
Bernie,
Yes.
just a matter of, can everyone see Bernie's full screen? Could we ask you to adjust your camera just a little bit so that we can see up to your chin? Okay, very good.
Okay.
Bernie, so before we get to your answer to who your target stakeholder is, right? This time we have to challenge you to leave your economist's perch for a while and maybe put on more of your entrepreneur's hat, Bernie. And we are challenging you to start something. But before that, do share with us your economist's viewpoint on some of the burning questions about jobs. To begin with, what is your reading of the 3, 6, 12-month outlook on Filipino jobs?
Well, first of all, as the macroeconomist of the group, let me present a framework for identifying the stakeholders. You know, when we were still a low middle income country, there were 4 Fs in the consumer market. As we know, the Philippine economy is basically propelled by consumption. 70% of our GDP is consumption. The 4 Fs, as many of you will remember, would be food, fashion, furnishings, and fun. So these are the most basic things to Filipinos. You know, food, fashion, and furnishings. These correspond to food, clothing, and shelter. And the last one, fun, means entertainment and tourism. Even for the poorest Filipinos, fun is a basic commodity. So this is where you will find potential new products. For example, in food, there are new ways of delivering food to households that are now being developed. I'm sure many of you have heard these different ways of delivering. And in the new normal, I'm sure even if things become normal, people will get used at least to have their food delivered to their homes, groceries, and so on and so forth. For furnishings, I was thinking with all the web seminars we're having, you need now probably to have some types of furniture in your home that will make it more comfortable. Like right now, we're all adjusting our furniture, you know, like now we're in bedrooms, etc. You may need a specific furniture that people can use in webinars. So for fashions, I think masks will be required for many, many months to come. I don't think, because there is a possibility that there'll be a recurrence and masks will be completely obligatory. Now you have to think of how, for both men and women, I'm not singling out women, people need to look more fashionable when they're wearing masks. So it's an area where you have to target certain stakeholders. And for fun, obviously there are all ways now that you have to think of people having fun, even in containment, even when they're inside their houses. I'm sure you can look for different ways of helping people have fun. Then, now that we are moving forward, hello, can you hear me? Hello?
We have some.
Hello?
Hello. There you go.
Yeah,
Yes.
can you hear me now?
Just a reminder to
Now,
everyone to turn off their mics until it's your turn to speak. But please go ahead, Bernie.
Now that we are what we can call middle in $4,000 threshold, $1,000 to $10,000. So some of them are forced, but what are these additional fitness? Definitely, very much related to the health problems we had. It's not only getting medicine, it's not only getting all sorts of vaccinations, but also more important, how do we improve our resistance? And that has a lot to do with all types of fitness products, and Andre knows that very well. Then Facebook represents the whole digital world. So all the demand now for social networking and so on and so forth. And the last one, a lot of things that have to do with education, not only formal but informal. I call it formation. So forming people either intellectually, skills-wise, that is definitely an area now that we have to address. So I'm sure there are many people who are now thinking of fitness products that are now needed because of the pandemic that we are going through. I leave it up to these entrepreneurs. As regards Facebook, well, you can have many, many more Zoom and all types of new products that will enable us to be in touch with one another, even when things become normal. And that's where I would definitely suggest people think of the stakeholders. And finally, as I mentioned in the last time I appeared, in education, a lot of families will now look for early learning centers right in the middle of their subdivision, their community units, and that is where a lot of these who have educators can put up early training centers. Incidentally, food, I also will remind you that I mentioned the tremendous need for urban gardening. You've read even the Secretary of Agriculture saying we have to grow vegetables, fruits right in the middle of our cities. We cannot wait for the vegetables to come from Trinidad. That's become very clear. And there's still a lot of empty lots that, teaming up with technology, it's like West Seeds Harvest, we can really produce a lot of the vegetables and fruits that people are now looking for, not to mention livestock. So these are the stakeholders I would address. High value crops being grown right in the middle of the National Capital Region. So I just suggested those 7 Fs. I will just summarize: food, fashion, furnishings, fun. Fun is the one will suffer a great hit. Travel and tourism will have a tremendous drop. So, but that's why we can look for other substitutes to travel and tourism. But you can now add fitness, Facebook, and formation into, now we can call the 7 Fs of consumption. I hope I've given some ideas.
I was saying, there you go. You heard it here first in 100R Launchpad, the 7 Fs of the new normal. Bernie, thank you so much for doing that. I think you've certainly given a broad expanse of new ideas and new opportunities. And of course, where there is hot commerce to be made, there will be jobs available. So looking at these sectors. Bernie, if before we rotate over to our other guests, if we can ask your opinion again as a macroeconomist, when we look at more traditional industry sectors, could you tell us where, for better or for worse, we're going to have real shocks versus real opportunities? You already mentioned tourism and hospitality, which is of course a big employer at various socioeconomic classes, especially the lower socioeconomic classes amongst Filipinos. Yeah, I don't see any way that it's not just that's gonna be a non-starter for many months from here on. But what opportunities do you see to turn that around, or to help the millions or hundreds of thousands of hospitality and tourism employed as a sector? Other sectors, one that is of very grave concern is OFWs, with the global economy screeching to a halt. Just to recap, you could probably do this better than I, but since I have notes here, some of the numbers we've been hearing, just over the past week, we're looking at 20 million unemployed in the US alone, right? Second quarter GDP forecast, probably the worst ever historically. The Nobel Prize winning economist Paul Krugman just went on record and said that, well, I have notes here. Yeah, you're looking at, I will not forget this. I shouldn't have had to refer to my notes. He's saying, don't even look at the stock market here. Look at two things: deaths and jobs as an indicator. Deaths and jobs. So we really need to look at where the jobs are going to drop. McKinsey estimates as much as 1/3 of American jobs are going to get lost. 1/3. So in the Philippines, when we have so much OFW repatriation of, first of all, the jobs there that are they're gonna have to repatriate here, and then the overseas remittances that represents, the fuels industry here is going to be lost. BPO, manufacturing. If you could comment on some of these more traditional industries, Bernie, and from a jobs perspective, where are the losers? And we got to hear about the losers. So we got a better perspective of this. And where are the winners? Please. Bernie, you're going to have to unmute your mic.
As you will remember, before this pandemic, 60 to 70 million Filipinos are the first tourists in their own country. That's a bigger market. And tourism amounted to 7. If we can just make sure the lockdown is finished and we can now go from Manila once again to Camiguin, to Siquijor, and so on and so forth, that's the area that can employ a lot of people. Cebu Pacific, PAL, can now increase their flights and all types of transport, especially people now can use the Philippine Nautical Highway to go from one island to another. That's one way to revive tourism, domestic tourism. I'm not counting on foreign tourism for a long time to come, because many countries, starting with the United States, don't seem to be able to cope with their pandemic problem. So there will be, at least, I've heard scientists saying, the next 3 years will be problematic for the US, because they don't seem to have really applied what Korea and others have. So let's not expect foreign tourism to recover. But domestic tourism can recover, let's say next year. Second, I am once again a prophet of boom for OFW. I don't see their millions of coming back. The demand for our workers is what economists call inelastic. Just think of the big controversy that our foreign minister had, Department of Labor. There are still nurses that are in demand. Can you imagine? Caregivers. A lot of Americans, even though they're unemployed, are not able to do the things that Filipinos do. I'm sure so that television program, Piers Morgan of UK, really heaped the highest praises to Filipino nurses in the UK. Countries in Europe cannot do what Filipinos. I think that I forecast remittances from overseas workers this year will still increase at 2%. I don't see a drop in oil remittances. So that's my prophecy. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But I've watched that figure over the last 15 years. And in all the recession, Arab Spring, what happened to the world, the values continued to deliver. What about BPO, IT? It might have a slight drop, but I think, as you very well know, people are precisely now turning more and more into digital ways of delivering services, and Filipinos are still among the best workers in the BPO IT industry. We may see a certain decline in voice-oriented, because it's easy to automate, artificial intelligence can take over, but we can move more and more towards high-value knowledge process outsourcing. Accounting, medical transcription, and so on and so forth. I think that is where the industry is leading their skills training. We can definitely defend that industry from a big drop.
Bernie, I have to ask about manufacturing. What's your quick take on manufacturing?
Manufacturing will be precisely in food, fashion, furnishings. For example, if we can just think of all the domestic market, let's forget export for a while. I think export will be challenged for at least the next 2 years. 110 million Filipinos to whom we can sell food, furnishings, fashions, and so on and so forth. And that's where manufacturing can survive. Even as you probably know, steel is now going to have an integrated steel mill, and that, with all the build that's happening, we need a lot of steel products. So we don't have to import a lot of the steel products once we have those integrated steel companies that are put up, let's say, when things are normal next year. So manufacturing can continue, but on the basis of the domestic market.
So you have to forgive me if, Bernie, Mr. Prophet of Boom, if I am a bit skeptical about all the good news that you're giving us, because I have to scratch my head.
Well,
If we go into all this manufacturing, where is the income going to come from that will drive consumption when we are forecasting 20 million lost jobs in the US? And what makes us think we're going to be better? We're going to do better in the Philippines. Let me actually translate this from manufacturing, Bernie, to the retail sector. We all know that our favorite malls are all closed. So maybe you can comment about the retail sector.
Is not going to recover. In fact, Tessie Cozon herself is just asking for 50% restoration of the business. So she knows that that's not going to recover. But you're asking, where will the purchasing power come from? If we have an increase of 2% in OFW, that's about $35 billion. Multiply that, and I'm going to make my forecast now, it will be 54 pesos to a dollar because of all this. Multiply that, and it's a big purchasing power in the hands of the relatives. You have the 10 million of them. Those are 10 million households approximately. And BPO IT, as you know, generates about $25 billion. As I said, it's not going to have a big drop. So that will still be a source of purchasing power. And then I'm very glad that the government is being very proactive. The government realizes that monetary policy won't work. Just reducing interest rates will not put money. That's why they are really doing everything possible to do what is pump priming. Hundreds of billions of pesos will be either contributed by the government institutions or the central bank, or will be borrowed. And our borrowing capacity is still very high because thanks to our present government and the previous government, we have really brought our debt to GDP ratio at a very admirable level, 40%. Do you know what it is in the United States? 100%. You know what it is in many emerging markets? 150%. Our percent, a lot of space, so to speak, to still borrow. And that will be used to pump the economy, prime pump. And that is where the purchasing power will come from that you're asking.
Very good. So I'm a little bit more convinced now, Bernie, and I'm feeling a lot better about myself and our prospects for the coming months. That is, ladies and gentlemen, the perennial effect of the prophet of boom. Miguel, if you could help me out with, I believe we're getting some comments from the chat box. If we could pick out some that are more salient while I post. Ladies and gentlemen, we're all going to get our turn, but I think you can appreciate with me why we're taking so much time with Bernie laying down the macroeconomic foundations for our launch padding, no? For our launch padding. One more question, Bernie, and this might be the one that hits home the most for many of us here. Many of us here represent big corporates, that's true. But even more of us are represented by the medium to small scale enterprises. What is your commentary and the outlook for SMEs?
Well, that's why I also praise the government for having focus on the problem of the micro, small, medium scale industries. They're spending as much as 80 billion pesos to subsidize their salaries and so on and so forth, so that they don't disappear. So that's a big concern. I mean, it's always in the presentations of President Duterte, and you hear Dominguez, you hear Lopez. They're always talking about our obligation to this sector, which accounts for 70% of the, let's say, business world. So I think that is going to be addressed by the government. It's one time when you see that responsible policies are being formulated. And well, some of these things I mentioned, whether it is high value crops, whether it is doing some things, the need of all these webinars, these are all going to be done by SMEs. They're not going to be done by large corporations. So the new opportunities are also for small and medium scale enterprises, though.
Bernie, your top 3 picks for the most promising SME sectors. That, you know, if you were an SME guy, what would you jump into? Top 3 picks.
Definitely food. Food either in the farming sector or in the manufacturing sector. That will be one. Second will be in all the startups, and you're very familiar with that have to do with the digital world. That's where people can start small. All the services that they're giving to people who are in the digital world. Even just for example, there's so much need right now to help organize webinars like this. I mean, you are definitely ahead of the curve, but there are a lot of people who would like to have webinars. They don't know how to use Zoom. They don't know how to use Google and so forth. Small startups can actually offer the service of organizing events like this, no? So in the area of the so-called Facebook. In the area of physical fitness, I mean, there are a lot of things that can be done, not by large corporation, but helping people really attain greater immunity. I'd like to emphasize that because I saw a message saying the most important way to fight COVID-19 is for us to improve our immunity against disease, meaning proper nutrition, sleep, exercise, and so on and so forth. So, and I believe that fitness is the long-term solution to our being less prone to get sick of any virus, whatever it is. No?
Okay, Bernie, thank you so much. We're going to rotate to our other lead collaborators, and then we'll come back to you. Thank you so much. Let's shift now to, I did see some audience comments that I think will be pertinent when we rotate to, for example, Kathleen Yu, who is in the space of AI and what that brings to this whole space of jobs. For now, I'd like to swing over to Gregory Kittleson. A bit of a background: Greg Kittleson is the K of KMC, which is not just the Philippines, but Southeast Asia's biggest provider of shared office spaces, flexible office spaces. Greg is the founder and executive chairman. And of course, we can look at that office spaces as some sort of leading indicator, where the jobs are and where the jobs aren't going to be. So Greg, maybe you can give us a window into the trajectories that you're seeing in terms of who's leasing and who's not leasing space, and other thoughts you might have, as well as if you could comment on if you were an entrepreneur, which you very much are. This is one of the things I really enjoy about my friend Greg. Such an entrepreneurial guy. What would you start right now in the areas of jobs? So please entertain us, Greg.
Okay, hello, thank you. Well, first of all, I've been in the Philippines for 17 years, so very pro-Philippines, pro-Filipino, and pro-Philippines economy. I've been very, very bullish on it. I think the IT BPO industry was going to continue. There is still a lot of demand. There are a lot of companies in the United States, Northern Europe, Australia, and even Singapore who have not yet set up captives or back offices in the Philippines, but are going to do so or are doing it right now. With regards to Zoom, we're actually setting up Zoom's back office in the Philippines. So we're hiring, I think, 250 employees for Zoom in the Philippines. I actually have a list of some of what the positions are, but technical support engineers, channel business analysts, phone implementation specialists, technical engineering managers, revenue managers, and so on and so on. So there's still a lot of opportunity. I think the IT BPO industry has a lot of legs. Obviously, a lot of the companies are, for the most part now, delaying some of their plans of expansion. So within our serviced office co-working space throughout the Philippines, and we have 26 locations, that's about 55 floors, mainly in Metro Manila, but also Clark, Cebu, and Iloilo. What we're seeing is the majority of the companies, of course, not expanding at this moment because obviously a lot of people can't make it to the office. Some of them are downsizing, but I think it's temporarily. There are some smaller companies, I want to say the S's of the SMEs and some of the startups, which I think this current situation does pose some problems for their potential growth. But for what we're seeing is the larger companies, the corporates that we have, are still maintaining, they're still paying their bills to us, luckily. And we expect them to grow, but some of them are actually still hiring. They're just hiring through us, and will have those employees work from home. But when the quarantine or the lockdown is lifted, they will then report to our offices. So it is going to be a bit of a rough ride, I think, this next month, but I think we'll get out of it. And the Philippines is resilient. As a doctor was saying, there's things that had happened before, like the global financial crisis, which didn't, or the Arab Spring, which didn't affect us as much as people thought it was going to. So again, I'm very overall bullish on this economy. I guess you also asked what business would I start if I was to start another business right now. I can give some ideas because I don't want to start another business right now. I have enough on my plate, but the doctor mentioned a little bit on this regarding food. Urban farming, I think, is something that can really take off. And I was also thinking, coming up with these urban farming kits. And what I think a startup company could do is speak to the building admins of all of these residential buildings in Metro Manila and say, listen, we have a product which we would like to essentially sell and potentially do some type of revenue split with your tenants inside the building. So the urban farming company goes and sets up the dirt, the fertilizer on top of buildings, sections it off, and then sell those little sections or rent those little sections to the residents of that building. And then within that, the urban farming startup can provide kits with seeds and fertilizer and some other things and best practices how to grow and maintain, and there's certain little area that they've rented on top of the the residential building that they live in. So it's really a two-prong approach. You'd have to deal with the landlords or the building owners or probably the building admin and say, listen, here's a product. We want to put green on top of your building, but again, the tenants can rent the space and we do some type of revenue split. So I think that's just one quick urban farming idea that I had, but I think there are some others as well.
Thank you, Greg. I'm just curious about your idea. Out of all the things you could have picked, why did that idea speak to you? Maybe you can parse it out, Greg, in terms of who do you think has the burning need for that? Is it the building management in terms of being able to offer more for their tenants and their locators? Or is it the residents themselves? What are you hearing? Where did you get this demand from?
To be honest with you, the idea I just came up with very quickly as mentioned the urban farming with food. He just threw out the word urban farming there, then actually quickly came up with the idea of doing the urban farming on top of residential buildings, because I live in BGC and I've been in a lot of different units here, and I look at some of the smaller residential buildings here, and you have these roofs that are just sitting there. There's no green on top. It's not like Singapore where, sorry to say, but most of the local developers here simply don't add green green space to the lots that they buy and with the buildings that they put on there. They don't think about it in a way they do in other countries or other cities. This kind of takes care of two things. You're adding green on top of the building, as well as coming up with another way for the building to, it's not a lot of money, but again, another way for the building to generate a little bit of revenue. Because if you look at real estate, commercial buildings, residential buildings, even hotels, there is always some opportunity to generate a little more revenue from the real estate that you own, whether it's a building or it's a plot of land. There's one way to do that, and I think it's a nice add-on for the tenants of that building.
I think, come to think of it, your idea also hits two of Bernie Villegas' 7 F's, right? Food for one, and then fitness. Because of the renewed sense in consumers' minds of thinking about their health, thinking about their immune system, thinking about eating right.
Well,
I think that'll hit it. Yes.
It is also actually a way to go outside, do something. You live in this urban environment, but you really don't have access to dirt. There are a lack of parks here, so you can actually get your hands dirty, get in the dirt. And if there's one thing that's lacking in the Philippines is vitamin D. People just in this country are not exposed, especially in the city, are not exposed to sunlight the way that they should be. So they're not absorbing that vitamin D. It's another way to get out there as well. And that plays into the health aspect of it.
Somebody muted me. Ironic, isn't it, that a tropical country would be deficient in vitamin D? Hey, Greg, we'll circle back to you. Thanks for your comments, for your insights.
Thank you.
Now let's circle around to Kristen Mariano. Kristen is in the manpower business. He's also done a lot of work on data studies about jobs at risk, even before this pandemic happened. Kristen, can you tell us a little bit about your viewpoints on what's going on at the macro level, where you see opportunities here, where your data shows? You did some studies with the University of the Philippines. Where are the jobs that are going to be at risk before the pandemic, and even more so in light of the pandemic, and where are the opportunities that you see? Commenting also on your slice of the jobs pie, how you're interfacing with the jobs market, given the manpower agency that you run. And then finally, if you could round it out, Kristen, by sharing with us your opportunity mapping. So if you were to start a business, who would the target stakeholder be in terms of businesses that have to do with jobs ventures? Go ahead, Kristen.
Okay, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. Based on the discussions earlier, I just want to add a couple of things. So number one, I'd like to add an eighth F to that discussed by Dr. Villegas. Though it's not part of consumption, I think it's important to consider the finances during this period because as people stay at home during the lockdown, a lot of the affected ones are employees whose jobs are at risk, being daily paid workers and who are currently on no work, no pay. So they comprise majority of our deployed personnel at Upscale. As you mentioned, that we are a dollar registered service contractor. But you see, once the people are on lockdown, they will be depending on government for financial assistance and food provision, the first F of Dr. Villegas. But sadly, the government response to financial aid and food distribution has been rather slow. And so it would be good for people to turn to an alternative source of finances or financial help. And this is where the idea comes in by way of peer-to-peer lending. So peer-to-peer lending is something that's already prevalent in other markets. But here in the Philippines, there have been some attempts to put up such businesses, but a lot of them are fraught with controversy. For example, shaming those who are not able to pay on time. So, but if that can be addressed, I think that peer-to-peer lending can fund even the traditional or urban farming ideas discussed by Dr. Villegas and Greg earlier.
Kristen, could you comment a little bit on the at-risk jobs studies that you co-produced, patterned after the World Economic Forum's model that you co-produced with the University of the Philippines, and how that might contribute to our audience's insights on the jobs market?
Okay, so essentially what we did with for that study, patterned after the World Economic Forum, is that we took a look at the jobs which were at risk of being displaced by automation and artificial intelligence, and we determined where we could transition them by way of building on their existing knowledge, skills, abilities, and technical skills. That is to say that whatever they know from whatever they have on their current job will not be put to waste. So just as an example, no? One of the jobs which will be rendered obsolete later on by robots would be fast food cooks. Right now, we're already seeing some pizza joints which produce pizzas which are untouched by human hands. So there are also some hamburger stores which produce burgers which are not cooked by humans. And so this is going to, I think, be the future. And so the question now becomes, where do we transition the fast food cooks? Now, they have knowledge, skills, abilities, and we've been able to track all of them because of the importance rating points on those KSAs as determined by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics, given the years and years of their tracking the job description, the requirements for each job position. So based on that, based on this example, the fast food cooks may be transitioned to, let's say, a chef by building on some of the skills that they have. So right now, what we're seeing in the worldwide is that the losers will be coming from, number one, small to mid-sized retailers, department stores, hospitality and tourism, travel, given companies' ban on business travel, so that will also affect the hotels and all. Events, concerts, sporting events, conferences, real estate. My research tells me that some of the companies will be cutting back on commercial real estate, for example, offices, because they would be saving on the expenses for those pricey buildings, on the lease of those pricey buildings. And then lastly would be oil and gas companies. So just turning to the hospitality and tourism, we've been able to plot travel agents pre-coronavirus as already declining, projected to decline from 2018 to 2028. Others like travel guides, hotel, motel, resort desk clerks, etc. No, they will be on average, they'll be growing on average or slower than average, but the coronavirus will just hasten their decline. So I think that we need to transition these people, and luckily, because of the similarity scores that we've been able to plot out for all 900 plus job types, we saw that travel agents could be transitioned to financial services agents or insurance agents, which we'll be needing a lot of in the future, because people will want to safeguard against situations like the coronavirus or similar incidents in the future. So I think the jobs that are going to be lost will not be recovered, but will need to evolve into some other job that is similar to their current positions or titles, given their existing knowledge, skills, and abilities.
So it's really about transferability of skill sets, because I find very little similarity just off the top of my head between travel agents and people involved in tourism and financial planners or insurance agents. But the underlying skills, I can see your point. So thank you for that, Kristen. Again, your answer to target stakeholders would be people who are in need of lending. And of course, where credit is scarce, is going to be consumer credit is going to be scarce nowadays. You're suggesting peer-to-peer lending as your area of opportunity. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We'll circle back to you now. Since you mentioned artificial intelligence and its impact on jobs, may we call on Kathleen Page Yu of Rumor Rocket, founder and CEO, if you could please give us your take on the job market from your particular purview as somebody who's involved in AI, and not just AI, but AI for jobs. So we'd really love to hear your point of view. And again, if you were to be wearing your entrepreneur's hat, which I'm sure you always do, what business, new venture, or perhaps pivot would you suggest, beginning with who the target stakeholders would be? Kathleen?
Yeah, hello, can you hear me? So I strongly believe that the Philippines has an unfortunate addiction to people. So I had a Singaporean friend come over and he was like, how come you have people opening the doors and people next to the person opening the doors to greet? And how come when I go down to the lobby of my condo unit, I greet at least 5 people, but I'm not clear on what their jobs are? And unfortunately, what the pandemic has shown us is a lot of that mindset is going to change, and it's going to change quickly. So basically, when you look at how people behave and the things that they look for when you have a pandemic that happens, the first thing is basically risk mitigation. So risk mitigation basically looks at how can I prevent this from happening again? How do I make sure my supply chain doesn't get disrupted again? And how do I make sure that it's easier for me to manage my processes, even if something like this happens again? And the first unfortunate conclusion that most companies are going to come to is maybe I shouldn't hire somebody who's just opening the doors, or maybe I can outsource the job of a receptionist to a chatbot, or how do I manage and create automated manufacturing lines. So as soon as the pandemic basically dies down, or before things start to get normal, most companies are going to be running after mitigation. They're going to be looking at how can I automate this process, that process. And the second thing that they're going to be looking at is agile squads. So when you talk agile, it's less about the command and control. A lot of Filipinos are very good to work with because they follow instructions very well. But when you talk agile, it's really about being able to think and act immediately and react to changes quickly. So that requires an education and leveling up of the workforce. What it does it mean to go beyond following instructions? How can I make sure that I can step up and do the things that I need to do to get things done? And a lot of it, as you mentioned earlier when you were doing the intro, it's less about waiting for a policy to come up before you act, and acting with the resources you have, and then basically adapting and iterating and improving from there. So people are going to need to be more self-directed. So once the risk mitigation is done, people usually go for two other things: the need for control, the need to control and exercise control over their environment, and the need for security. How can I still feel like how do I still feel like there's still structure in my environment, especially since I'm not going to work anymore, I'm not following my day-to-day routines anymore. And if I'm being honest, the need for control is there because most people look at their jobs and the day-to-day as what gives them purpose and what gives them meaning to move forward. And if you think about it, a lot of it is less about finding a path or finding some instructions to follow, or finding the best course of action given the situation. It's more about accepting that with the coronavirus, a lot of things are going to change and maybe they won't go back to the way things were. So if you have people who are still waiting for this opportunity to recover, or this industry to get back on its feet, it doesn't make sense to wait for that. It just makes sense to look at what the situation is now and see how you can control that environment. So an example of a business that has been changed by the coronavirus is really restaurants. And basically, most restaurants right now are doing a packed meal service, right? But what people run after when they go to the restaurant is actually the experience and the ambiance of sitting in the restaurant, enjoying a meal. So if you think about it, the value proposition of a restaurant is in that experience, in the waiter making sure that the environment is good and whatnot. So basically, restaurants can actually pivot around that and think about how can you sell experiences in this environment? How can you give your customers a need for control in this kind of an environment? Similarly, urban farming actually also addresses that need for control. People feel like, oh, suddenly I can go to the grocery store, but I'm not sure whether the supplies that I need will be there. If I do the farming, then I can have control over my own plot of land and over what I eat and whatnot. Okay. So basically, that's a good opportunity as well. Security, things like religion, wellness, mental health, yoga, online meditation exercises, those those things will definitely boom, especially since when the societal structure disappears around people, what the first thing we usually do is look for an anchor, or basically a thing that will help us feel like, hey, everything is still normal and everything is still okay. And basically, yeah, that's it. Or
Kathleen, if I may, you packed that with so much juice. Can I ask two follow-up questions, Kathleen? The first is you're spoken like a true entrepreneur, and I perhaps more than most of our audience know your background. Could you please give us, and this is part of the first question about mapping your zone of opportunity, no, is telling us why, to begin with, you even have a personal experience or interest in the things that you're talking about. Where do you? So, in other words, could you give us a little bit of context as to where you're speaking from, your experience, and why you speak with such authority about these matters? And you put it in ways that are very human, no? Security, control, those types of things. And the other thing is, if you could then crystallize for us, because you ran through a couple of opportunities, if you were wearing your entrepreneur's hat again, what would your target opportunity be that you would jump on and launch immediately? And talk to us in terms of who the target stakeholders and the particular pains would be, because you ran through quite a bit now. So again, what would you focus on in terms of opportunities, and then in particular, what's your experience base? Where are you coming from? Please, Kathleen.
okay. So my background is basically a combination of behavioral science and artificial intelligence. I started my company as a college student and spent a year in MIT and Brown, basically working on the machine aspect. But the approach is really centered around understanding people, how they act, and whether you can predict if the person will perform, if the person will do well, if you understand aspects of their personality and behaviors. So that's my background.
Kathleen, sorry, the application of AI on behavioral and performance
Yeah,
on the side.
yeah.
Are you using that as a practical application for talent acquisition or for talent management? Can you talk to us a little bit?
So basically, we apply it to recruitment, retention, whether you're giving people the right incentives given the context, wellness, and burnout. So the entire talent management cycle, because what we recognize is really a lot of the ways that we look at jobs today are still based on Industrial Revolution era mindsets, where one person fits all. So basically, the one person leaves, you can replace it with the next person. But that viewpoint is getting outdated the better automation gets. So what I realized is talent needs to level up in a way to basically address the new challenges of the new environment. So what does it mean when day-to-day rote jobs are being automated? A lot of it is really looking at things like agile, looking at how people behave, how they control their behaviors, and whether people can learn to meet the changing expectations of the environment. So yeah, so in terms of the best opportunity for me, a lot of business opportunities right now are redefining how they deliver value, because the supply chain and the means to deliver that kind of value no longer works. So you have a lot of companies more and more having to behave like startups. But the idea that I want to present, really, if there's something you guys take away from my talk, is the idea of me incorporated, or the person acting and working and moving forward and innovating the same way that a corporation does, and how talent can level up in this kind of an environment. Because realistically, if people have the resilience, the capacity to learn, and the capacity to develop consistently, no matter what the environment, it's not a question of jobs. It's just a question of what's the right skill I need to pick up right now to be relevant.
So would that perhaps, Kathleen, translate, let's say in terms of a practical venture around jobs? So from relying on corporate HR to do people development, is to start services, for example, that allow individuals to foster and nurture their, in your words, is it me development or me incorporated?
I think the first thing that needs to happen is people need to take the responsibility for their own personal development and their own personal growth. So it's not the responsibility of the company to train, to develop you, to make sure that you can do your job, but people have to start looking at opportunities to learn beyond the workplace, beyond college, and so on, and apply what they've learned quickly. At and basically, at the same time, there's an opportunity for people to redefine what their jobs mean on a day-to-day basis.
Got it.
It's not about putting in a 9 to 5 or making sure that you get a set amount of work done and so on, but it's about how can you add value to the company, or how can you add value to yourself with the skills that you do. So for me, a lot of it is about personal responsibility and taking an opportunity to learn and get better, and basically understanding that in terms of priorities, things are not exactly going to get back to normal. But if you look at risk mitigation, the need for security, need for control, then you can basically use it as guideposts for how companies, people, governments are going to behave moving forward.
Got it. Miguel, do you have anything? Thank you, Kathleen. Miguel, did you want to interject with something?
Yeah. Hi, Kathleen. This is Miguel from Ignite. I was just wondering because a lot of the work I do, I get asked a lot about how they feel AI is going to replace the jobs that they do, and I've always been of the mindset that rather than seeing AI displacing jobs, I mean there is an opportunity for for people to use it to actually augment the work that they actually do now. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, how, I mean, is AI something that they should fear or not?
I think if you look at a lot of the AI tools that are being applied now, a lot of them can do repetitive, narrow tasks very well, because they're able to learn from a large amount of data quickly. Is AI itself gonna stay like that for the next 5 years? Probably not. I've started work on algorithms that can actually adapt with context. So you have self-driving models, machine vision models that if you change a little bit of the data that you provide to the algorithm itself is able to adapt. But is it something that people need to fear? Not necessarily. I mean, during the Industrial Revolution, there were people who were afraid of machines and how it was taking over the responsibilities of the artisans. But basically, we move forward from that. And for me, it's not in a place, it's not people are going to be afraid, and that's a given, but the reality is you have to go beyond that fear to see how you can improve and how you can uplift what you're doing to move with the times Because if there's anything this pandemic has taught us, it's really that everything changes, and the speed at which everything's changing is going to get crazy because of how this happened. But the reality is people get up, they adapt, they get better, they learn new skills, they adapt around the AI, they work with the AI to improve how the predictions are. So those things are there, and they're given. So for me, it's less about fear, it's more about how you can improve moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Let me jump in there.
And it's Bernie.
Okay.
Can I say something about this?
Yes, please go ahead.
As an educator, I'd like to contribute my thoughts. I've looked at this, and there is a book that probably some of you have read. It's called Robot Proof by the president of Northeastern University in Boston. And his thesis is, as long as we introduce into our educational system more and more of the humanities and the liberal arts, we will develop in our workers the critical thinking skills, effective communication, both in writing and verbally, and most especially relate one discipline to another. These are the types of skills that will never be replaced by robots, by artificial intelligence. And that's exactly what I see the industry association of BPO-IT is trying to do, to upgrade the skills, for example, of call center agents. And we did something with TELUS. We actually offered liberal arts humanities programs, I'm talking about my university, to their call center agents so that they become more and more knowledge process outsourcing workers rather than just call center agents. And I think this is very important, especially for parents, to make sure that when their children choose universities, they choose universities that always have the liberal arts as a foundation for any specialization. And those are the people that will never be replaced by machines. Those with critical thinking skills, effective communication, and the ability to relate one discipline to another.
So thank you, Bernie, for that, and for building on Kathleen's point. I think I'd like to start the next round of roles and cadence by bringing in our inside passers, people who've gotten special invitations to speak up. And let me get the ball rolling on that by maybe interjecting a few things. There are two guests that we are still waiting on, and I am in a position to represent one of them. And the other one, Secretary Ernie Pena, apparently had sent word before we started that he had a special schedule conflict. And I've been waiting all this time, hoping that the schedule conflict will resolve itself. So we still have some time. Let's see if the Honorable Secretary is able to catch up with us. The other set of guests that we had invited who had sent their regrets, I'm able to represent them because Ignite is an investor in this company. That's my, disclaimer. This is my kuya. My kuya is on-demand errands. And the long and short of it, on the more practical side of things, as we've heard from Kathleen about AI, and on the other hand, Bernie about macroeconomics, this is very much on the ground reality. Where are the jobs? Well, the good news is I've talked to the co-founders, Farouk Merali, who is also CEO of M-Clinica. He is stuck in Jakarta right now, but obviously his company is doing very well because M-Clinica is in the healthcare space, and Shahab Shabibi. So they are, on the My Kuya front, on the other side of the spectrum of jobs for now. And in a moment, I'll relate it to why this speaks to Bernie and Kathleen's point. No, there are 10,000 jobs, ladies and gentlemen. Look at my hands. 10,000 jobs that are waiting to be filled in the next 24 hours via My Kuya. Okay, and that's just in the next 24 hours. Earning, listen to this, between 800 to 1,200 pesos a day. That's twice minimum wage, right? There are jobs. So what do these kuyas and ates do? They run errands, such as, for example, going to the grocery store. Unlike, for example, Metromart, where you are left to the inventories that are available via the app, most of which is not being updated in real time. With a My Kuya errand, the kuya or the ate goes to Rustan's or to Shopwise and texts you or shows you what the produce is, if you want vegetables, if you want this or that, and then you give the instructions right then and there. So it's real time, it's ad hoc, and there are 10,000 of these jobs that we've had to artificially cap demand. In other words, there's more demand than we can service right now. So where are the ates and kuyas? This comes, I wear another hat here, and if I were to start something right now, among many other things, I would say wearing my other hat. Yesterday, I was in a board meeting, late evening, and we were talking about the potential displacement of 100 employees, right, for one of these companies. And among many other pains, we talk about the zones of opportunity as pains, adhering to the target stakeholders. So among many other pains that business owners and business leaders have to deal with nowadays is, the very grave, heavy matter of you have to, no matter how you slice and dice it, you have to let go of some employees, right? And in this case, we're talking about 100 of them. So is there a solution to help me, what's the word? There's onboarding, right, when you're hiring people, and there's, I suppose, the word offboarding, when you have to let go of people. If there was a solution to be able to offboard a segment at least of my severe workers to environments like My Kuya, so that it's not just about my psychic welfare of feeling less guilty. It's also providing a mechanism of continuity for these human beings who've worked with me. So that would be an example of a solution that if you cut across the levels and different functional levels of an organization, so from the very clerical and custodial, you might be able to pass them to My Kuya type. From Kristen Mariano a while ago was saying a parallel is to be able to, for example, transition travel agents and hospitality advisors and tour guides to insurance agent, to insurance or financial. That is another way of transitioning. So if there were ways to transition people to more of these new types of jobs. Now, what are these new types of jobs and how do they relate to Bernie's spiel about liberal arts and to Kathleen's spiel about people have to learn to take care of themselves? Is when you are no longer relying on traditional corporate employment and a traditional notion of a job where your boss tells you what to do, you're suddenly put in a place, and I'll use My Kuya again as an example, where the kuya or the ate becomes precisely what Kathleen is talking about, Me Incorporated. The kuya's brand is not My Kuya, it's their ratings and reviews for how well they do the errands. So they take responsibility for their punctuality, for the quality of their work, for the quality of their communications. And it's just a very different mindset from when you are employed, your boss tells you what to do, etc. So I'm going to pass it on to our inside passers. You know who you are, so just unmute your mic and or you can do the chat box. I will start it off by reading a private message that was sent to me. This one, I'll keep him anonymous. If he's still around and he hears his story, please feel free to unmute and cut me off so you can tell your own story. But this is also very instructive. So this is the CEO of a Fortune 500, global Fortune 500, top 20, who's based in Singapore. And he's saying, I will just read it off. My family office invested in Lite, L-I-T-E, which basically has been funding part-timers globally and is the biggest in Southeast Asia. So for the Philippines, he suggests that we should build an economy around freelancers and part-time workers and empower them strongly. So rolling out platforms to allow freelancers again, when you're a freelancer, you're answerable to yourself. You are your own brand. So there are elements again of what Paige, Jennifer was saying and advising us. People have to take care and take responsibility for their own progress, their own growth, and that is more possible when you have these platforms where you are not employed, but you simply find jobs, work to do, being passed on by others. You become your own brand. So with that, I open the floor to our inside passers. If you have your own thoughts, especially about your zones of opportunity, who your target stakeholders would be, and what the target problems would be in the area of jobs.
Hi, can I go first? I'm Howard.
Yes, Howard of JG Summit. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm part of a company called Davi Data Analytics Ventures Inc. And we've been using data to see how customers behave in Robinsons Retail. And it's quite interesting when you're talking about how My Kuya can be used to shop, and that's the ideal way. I think one of the things we notice is the spike in shopper behavior. We've been doing personas of our shoppers, segmenting certain groups into particular types. People who are practical affluent, they always buy in bulk, like 5,000 to 10,000 per purchase, whereas some would only do small purchases, 500. And depending on what they buy, we know what kind of shopper they are, if they have children in their family. And we're able to see the shift in behavior, like for the affluent who usually buy 5 to 10,000 each purchase. 2 weeks before the ECQ, they spent 20,000 on average, whereas others only started doing their increase the week before the quarantine. So we're able to track that behavior and see what they buy. Like many people would buy tissue the week before the quarantine and toiletries, and then when the quarantine started, suddenly the sales went below the quarantine time. And we use this data to see how customers shop, and we eventually plan to have our own self-contained e-commerce system. And the biggest challenge, we're talking about job opportunities, is really finding more people who can do the shopping for them, because that's going to be the new normal, right? The new normal will be people don't want to keep on lining up. You won't have time to do that when work starts happening. But because the new normal is social distancing, it's going to be harder for people to shop. If in the past they did it during their lunch break, it's no longer possible. But being able to use My Kuya or hire more people to do personal shopping and pay that extra amount, but it's worth that 1 hour, 2 hours you'll save. And then being able to use the data that we have so that we can recommend the right products to you. Because many times when you shop online, it's harder to do the impulse buy. It's harder to remember everything you need to put in because you have to look for each item. Whereas a supermarket, you know how to go around it. But with our data, we can actually recommend the right products to people. And it's really leveraging this job opportunity to hire more people as the ECQ lightens up, but social distancing remains. Partnering with the right group, someone like, let's say, My Kuya, and be able to tap these personnel who are used already to serving certain people. And what's nice about this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you talk about My Kuya, I think last year we were talking about it, certain people would look for certain kuyas that they're used to, right? For certain kuyas and ates. So there would be preferred ratings if there are. And if someone knows already how to serve them and the time that they can serve them, we can actually optimize how their service. And I think it will be a very good way to service customers as we leverage this data and make customers have an easier time doing online shopping.
Thank you, Howard. So that's Howard Go of Davi Ventures, which is JG Summit's data science analytics arm. He will be joining us for Thursday's Digital Ventures in the New Normal challenge. A couple of points there to tie up what Howard said. No? To Bernie's point, one of the 7 F's is food. People aren't going to stop eating because there was a pandemic, because of the new normal. It's just that we're going to be eating and shopping and sourcing differently. And here, Howard is already sketching a new normal where we shop differently, tying up e-commerce, data, and the blood, sweat, hands, and feet of kuyas and ates, because at the end of the day, these are still physical goods that need to be picked up, sorted, and delivered. And I would argue, as a way of wrapping up this point, Howard, that it's not just the physical distancing, social distancing element, but really, in a sense, my time is better invested in other things rather than going to the grocery, right? So it's also about efficiency of, I don't have time and they have time. And why don't I just pay them so that I can move on to do higher order things? Isn't that a more efficient way, as the economist?
Yeah, I agree.
Andre-
I agree.
Thank you, Howard, for that.
Andre,
Yes.
Andre, could I say something about that?
Please.
Information. Already, a lot of jobless drivers are actually offering their services already to households to buy groceries for them. And they actually even use apps, and they actually even invest their own money to actually buy and then just get reimbursed with a fee. That's already happening.
Yes.
Driver, yes. So I think Howard's point is very well taken. Oh, yes.
Right. So thank you very much for that, Howard. Anyone else from the from our inside passers who want to take a stab? Or maybe do we have anything in the chat box that we want to bring up, guys? If not, the inside passers, the floor is now open for the audience to wow us with your own ideas about your zones of opportunity, your target stakeholders, and what pains you would be focusing on. Miguel, did we pick anything up from the chat box?
Yes, so here, we have something here from Miguel de Buncho.
Yeah.
All right. Now he asks, won't the new normal force companies to look at waste processes and be forced to automate? Hence, a push towards digitization, automation would not add to the demand of jobs, both locally and international front.
So I saw this question from Miguel, which I'd like to say thank you for, but I purposefully did not bring this up because I thought, and she did.
Yeah, she did actually.
She addressed this question, and I wanted to give that. So scrolling down again, anybody. This is a very informal webcast, so anybody with an idea, just jump in as we're scrolling down the screen. From Gerard Navarro, there is a new opportunity for multimedia freelancers right now. It's called live stream designers. They add professional graphics and program your streams like professional broadcasting using e-gaming streaming software. So I mean, again, this is something that at a more macro level, Bernie Villegas had tuned us into, right? A lot more people are going to be doing exactly what we're doing right now. How do you make this professional grade so that, you know, I don't suddenly have funny things showing up in my background or Miguel's background, because this is going to be part of our new normal. So that's a very nice pickup there, Gerard. Thank you for bringing that up.
There's one here from Jose Ranola. What are the practical opportunities for existing businesses in general in order to recover from losses actually suffered at this time?
Aha. I believe we're going to pick up questions and points that are centrally relevant to our theme of jobs ventures. I'm not sure that this is rather tangential. So unless anybody wants to pick this up, we're going to skip that. Somebody mentions COBOL. We still have a lot of COBOL programmers in the Philippines. I haven't heard that in a while. From Libay Senson, any ideas to repurpose hotels? Aha. So we have a hotel owner here. CapEx investment in hotels are huge, and revenue loss during these months severely affects the ROI. Anyone has any ideas about what hotels should do? We'd love to hear it. Xiao Yong Chu. Training of skills is a personal responsibility and the role of companies to create an environment where the staff can use their skills freely and experiment to grow together. And then from Rafa Alunan, agree we must train students for the jobs available in the era of AI and digital. Right. So the point is, instead of being scared about it, why don't we just prepare our human capital to interact with it? Anybody from our expert panel, from our lead collaborators, want to jump in at this point? At this point, it's a free for all. Anybody?
Hello, Andre.
Yes, please. Yes.
Hi,
Who is-
may I? Yeah, hi. Right.
Yeah.
I think the video is not very good, so I'm gonna turn it off. Right. Hello, Andre. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for organizing this. I think it's a very wonderful forum wherein people can get a lot of inspirations and motivations on how to help create more jobs.
Yeah.
I just want to share in the retail front, we are a small tech company, and a while ago, Howard was mentioning about how to make use of My Kuya, to do alternative ways of delivery, which I think is wonderful. What we are doing is that we are actually building an e-commerce platform that is to be used freely by the retailers, rather than just like the existing Lazada or Shopee, we charge a hefty percentage. And we also kind of integrated tightly with existing operations so that we will be able to somehow transform the existing people from doing, say, cashiering and bagging to picking. So yeah, just like to share some of the things that's happening. And actually, we already have about 6 supermarkets that have came on board since early this year, right? And we are working to share this platform with more people. Yeah.
Thank you, Victor, and more power to you. And
Right.
hopefully you can create more jobs. I mean, if more retail stores are able to move from their physical landed presence to online presences, then they would be able to sustain their businesses and therefore sustain jobs. So more power to you on that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? Again, this forum, this challenge exists so that we are moved to identify business opportunities, in this case, jobs ventures that we want to start, whether as independent entrepreneurs or, for example, like in Howard's case, part of a big conglomerate, a pivot or a new business line or a new way of creating value for your companies. Any ideas out there? Any more? Okay, if not, Miguel, if I may invite you again, and Karen, we can in the time that we have left, I don't see the timer. What I'd like to do right now is move over to the second segment just a little bit to give people a taste of how the 100-hour Launchpad works, which is to say, once we've identified our zone of opportunity, which again consists of the triangulation of who's your target stakeholder, what are their pains, and what is your vision of impact? How do you move them from the current situation to an envisioned situation? Then you start doing ideations, right, of how you can fulfill the Form 2 statement. So if we can show a visual of that part of the process, and then maybe Miguel, you and I can, because a lot of ideas have already been thrown out to the public, right? Where, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to add the next sprinkling of value is a lot of times people get stuck on ideas, right? Ideas are meaningless. They're useless unless we can make them happen. And so what Miguel and I want to do is take 1 or 2 ideas that came up in today's session and simulate for you how we can do rapid prototyping and rapid iterations, what Jennifer had referred to as agile, right? So that we can take an idea to Okay, here it is. Miguel, do you want to zero in on ideation and prototyping and evidence maybe while I scour um, uh, the idea bank for what we might work on? Please go ahead.
Well, something that came up a while ago was urban farming.
Yes, I see Greg Kittleson on our screen. Why don't we take that as an example? And Miguel, before coming to us at Ignite, came in from the Stanford D School, has taken all sorts of, I think all the coursework in IDEO, IDEO, of course, being the McKinsey of human-centered design. So this is his expertise, and I'd really like now to yield the floor to Miguel, who will take us through some very practical ideas for how to take our ideas, into rapid prototyping and iteration, so we can get to market sooner rather than later. Go ahead, Miguel.
Well, for something like urban farming, where the infrastructure will be, a little. I mean, you'll have to set up a lot for that to actually happen. Aside from needing the space, you need the tech, So there may be some fundamental questions that you can actually prototype around. Like, first and foremost, how do people feel about buying vegetables from an urban farm? Is that even something that should be communicated? So a early stage prototype I would do is just, I'd probably create maybe some sort of like poster materials just to see how people react to the idea of buying things from an urban farm. So it's it may seem like it's far from the actual idea that you have in mind, but it tests some fundamental realities that need to be true in order for a urban farm to to work now. So that's probably the first thing I would do for that. So even the thing about rapid prototyping, that it allows us to test these possibilities without really having to break the bank. And that's probably the first thing I do around that. It sounds logically that urban farming works, but there are a lot of factors that we'd want to be able to test it. And instead of trying to test with an actual urban farm, I'd probably prototype around what conditions need to be true in order for an urban farm to succeed in, let's say, the city setting.
I would imagine too that, Miguel, that there must be some examples of, even at the micro level, some urban farms that already exist that you could probably go in and interview them.
Well, yes, you can probably get data. There's a startup in like Berlin called Infarm, wherein they partnered, I think, with the third largest grocery chain in Germany. And like what they did was, instead of you picking fresh produce from the freezer section or from the fridge section, they set up a urban farm inside the grocery where you would walk in and pick the produce. So it might make sense if you could reach out to them and see what type of like learnings and like insights you could gather from them. That would also be a prototype in that idea.
Anybody else want to bring up their ideas so we could exchange some rapid prototyping mechanisms specific to your ideas? In the meantime, just bring it up. In the meantime, we have had several more items coming in via our chat box. So Francis mentions that hotels can be converted into luxe service residential units because more and more people will stay at home and work from there. So beauty services can be on concierge service type, but wearing PPEs and necessary paraphernalia.
For something like that, like for beauty services, a good way to like just like prototyping that would be probably take a photo of someone in a PPE suit doing some pedicures, bring out an ad from that, see how many people actually sign up for it, and then it gives you an idea of whether people are actually comfortable with getting a manicure or a pedicure with them wearing PPE. So again, this idea of being able to test things very early on in the process without having to, spend on it is one way.
So there's a good one here from Daniel Enriquez. I feel that there will be a fear of parents sending kids to school after the pandemic. So find alternative modes of educating the future workforce. I can see maybe hybrid programs that can go online. In fact, this is the phenomenon referred to as homeschooling. I believe one of the foremost proponents of homeschooling and owners of one of the biggest networks of homeschoolers in the country was with us, or might still be with us if he wants to speak up. I gave him an insider pass. That's Edric Mendoza, Edric and Joy Mendoza. So interestingly enough, I ran into Edric a few weeks ago in the middle already of the ECQ, as we live in the same village. And I was remarking how this is going to be a golden age and a golden opportunity to build on homeschooling. And of course, when you have more and more people going into homeschooling, there are alternative requirements, because how do you do PE? How do you do music and arts? How do you do formation? Bernie Villegas had referred to that as an adjunct of education is formation. I know a lot of people, for example, who like the idea of sending their kids to Jesuit schools, but of course that becomes prohibitive to go into homeschooling if you can't have the Jesuit formation. So can there be a mechanism for extending Jesuit formation to homeschoolers, and so on and so forth? There are a lot of opportunities that are going to be derived out of the new normal, the new ways that people live at home, play at home, study at home, and work at home, which of course will create more jobs. I'm going to keep quiet for a few minutes, a few seconds here to let you guys talk. I see here that my friend Chin Wee has registered his thoughts. Chin Wee, if you'd like to speak up as an insider pass holder and tell us more about Lyft, we'd love to hear that, certainly.
Hear me?
Chin Wee, welcome to our Launchpad. Yes.
Thank you. So thank you, Andre, for doing this. I think it's very good to know that you have been keeping the leadership in Philippines at work and work hard even when they're at home. So I look at it as an outsider, even though I had my honeymoon in Cebu and have my operations over there. I always had a good feeling for Filipinos, and it's simply because you are a very talented workforce, and it's very hard to replicate also the English speaking skill that the Filipino community has. So this is the time for the country to even thinking about how to help freelancers and how to help the digital media side of the talent of the Filipino people. I think the world is going to change a lot more. You need more part-timers who are no longer serious about the real economy. What I mean by that is that there will be some who want to have a stable governmental job, but many of them will take a view that enough is enough. This is the time to really develop my talent, and Philippines on a per capita basis will have the highest form. So I think the country can facilitate, whether it be homeschooling or urban farming and all this, to allow the system to flourish, right? And to help the entrepreneurial spirits of the talented Filipino people to rise up in this situation. It could be simple things like becoming an Instagrammer, where because of your talent, right, you'll be able to work with other companies who are really funding all these talents, right? Right. So converting the part-timer income into a monthly income, right? That has been the trend in Singapore and in many countries. And Filipino, I think, could be a key winner in this new economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chin Wee. That is my classmate from Yale. Chin Wee has advanced degrees from Harvard and Yale and is the current Asia Pacific CEO of Trafigura, the Trafigura Group. which is an independent oil trader in a Fortune 500 company. So Chinwe, thanks for visiting us. And I'm certainly going to look into Lyft, as you suggested. Light, as you suggested, for more of these freelancer. Whether we like it or not, we're going to see a lot more freelancers. So we might as well enable platforms and other support mechanisms to be able to bring up this new generation of freelancers and create an environment where they can succeed, and where the demand side that needs their freelance work can easily find and manage work with them. So that's certainly an area to look at. We are going to see a new generation of freelancers flood this market, whether we like it or not. So that's a good one. Anybody else want to speak up? At this point, ladies and gentlemen, if we could invite you, Miguel, do you mind if we go back to the screen, or rather, Karen, can we go back to our screen? Sorry, at this point, it is 4:27. I am not able to see our timer. For those of you who are familiar with the CBS show, the long-running CBS show, 60 Minutes, we were supposed to have a similar timer counting down, making sure that we were managing our 2 hours properly. So these 2 hours, ladies and gentlemen, by way of starting our wrap-up, was never about completely or comprehensively being able to get to some finish line, right? That's too much to ask for 2 hours. It is rather meant to certainly to inspire in each one of us this notion that the world is alive with opportunities. And when I say opportunities, it is not just about, it's not at all about opportunities just to make money or to advance ourselves. The world is full of opportunities because the world is full of needs, and human beings by the thousands, by the millions who need these set of needs. And in this new normal, there are all sorts of new needs that are being created that are unaddressed. So the whole point of 100-Hour Launchpad is to inspire in us by getting us to think through a process or to participate in a process where we identify opportunity maps and we get started on methods of rapid prototyping them so that they can reach some sort of critical mass that will allow them to launch. And for those of you who are serious about this process of 100-Hour Launchpad, whether you are in big corporate or you are an independent entrepreneur, maybe you have one of these ideas, please approach us. We are here to support you. We are here because we want to see more of these ventures from more of these entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs bubble up and come to fruition. And if you need process help, we will be there. If you need financial capital in terms of equity investments, provided that there is a fit, we are happy to invest. So this is our way, again, of doing our part and fighting our own front lines in this global pandemic. At this point, you know what? There is still, we're still getting flooded with messages. I am certainly happy to remain for those of you who still want to talk. But for those of you who we have detained for already 2 hours, I want to, on behalf of my team and Miguel Aranaz, my partner, say thank you to you, certainly to our lead collaborators. I apologize again that Secretary Pernia was not able to make it today, but to Dr. Bernie Villegas, Greg Kittleson, it's good to see you again, buddy. I don't see Bernie anymore. To Kristen Mariano, good to see you, Kristen. And to Kathleen Yu, it was awesome hearing from each of you. We shall stay in touch. And to the rest of our audience, thank you. Let's keep on launching and getting on the path to launching new ventures, because new ventures are about solving problems and making the world a better place. On that note, we're going to close up another 2-hour session of 100-hour Launchpad. Again, inviting you to next Thursday. This Thursday, it's going to be digital ventures. So what is bubbling up on the digital front? We're going to have the chairperson of IPG Media Brands headlining that, along with client side, the head of strategy for SM Malls, Howard Go, whom you heard from on the JG Summit front with Robinson's Land and Cebu Pacific, will be joining us. A host of other names. You can see the link there, so it takes place Thursday. And for those of you who are lucky enough to be part of our insider network, we may be able to bring you in with RV De Vera's permission to our closed door session with Union Bank. That will be on Friday. That's another 100-hour challenge. So on that note, I thank you. Zoom jobs in Manila. We just if you're looking for jobs, there's a platoon of jobs that Greg Kittleson just fielded. Just look for it in our webcast. I am not trying to play favorites here. I'm just looking at chat box as it has popped up. So as of now, we are officially closing our 100-hour Launchpad, but I am here to informally chit-chat with anyone who wants to stay and pick up any more opportunities. Greg, salamat po. Good to see you, man.
I have another meeting to go to. Thank you for having me.
All right, keep flexing those muscles. Bring more Zooms in, my friend.
Okay, thanks.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.